Okay, welcome in everyone to Accelerate to Industry. Once again, I'm Jay Skipworth with the University Career Center and very excited to have all of you here today for a great presentation about translating your academic career to the workplace. And we've got three incredible speakers to help facilitate that for us. So a couple of notes, just so you're aware. At different points in the presentation, we will pop up a quick poll for you. So on the right-hand side of your navigation in Hop-In, you'll want to click the little poll tab and you'll see those polls come up, and that way you can give instant feedback to the questions of our presenters. And then at a different point in the presentation, we will break out into three small breakout sessions for a quick 5-minute debrief. To do that, all you'll need to do is on the left-hand side navigation, click the sessions button when you're prompted to do so, and then you'll pick one of the three rooms divided amongst our three speakers here. If you will, with our group, just to do a little self-selecting for yourself, kind of divide yourself by alphabet amongst the three areas. So maybe A through K go into the first room, L through, let's say, O into the next room, and then back into the alphabet go into the third room. I'll try to remind that as well as in the chat as we get to that point. And then after those sessions, you will come back to the stage. So you'll just click the stage link again to rejoin for some final words. And then there will be a general Q&A for you to session into at the very end. So very excited to have everyone here. And so without further ado, I'm going to do quick introductions on our speakers and turn it over to them. We have Jennifer Hull from Ally, Holly Milanese from JELD-WEN, and John Frye from JELD-WEN with us here today. Jennifer Hull has over 10 years of experience in university recruiting spaces. She's currently the Early Talent Recruiting Manager for Ally, and in this role, she oversees recruiting for all internships and early talent roles with Ally. Previously, she worked at Electrolux, where she was the end-to-end internship program coordinator and oversaw the internship program at Queen's University of Charlotte as well. Jennifer has a strong passion for helping students find that first step, whether it be internship or job, and jumpstart their careers. A native Texan who now happily calls Charlotte her home. So Jennifer Hull from Ally, welcome in. Holly Milanese from JELD-WEN serves as the manager for corporate onboarding programs and university relations. And JELD-WEN is a leading global manufacturing company headquartered right here in Charlotte. In her role, Holly oversees the Early Careers Program, which includes a 10-week summer internship and a 24-month early career rotational program. Holly graduated in 2008 with a Bachelor of Arts in Psychology from UNC Charlotte. Go Niners. And while at UNC Charlotte, she was involved in research and dedicated time to her minors of sociology, women's studies, and gerontology. Now she serves as the president for the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences Alumni Council, and also holds a master's degree in organizational development and executive coaching certificate. Holly's passionate about helping others grow to their fullest potential, including supporting working mothers and recent college graduates. So welcome, Holly Milanese. And last but not least, John Frye of JELD-WEN is from Charlotte, North Carolina, and attended Appalachian State University in 2011, where he graduated with a marketing degree and worked in the sales logistics field for a few years. In 2018, John decided to make a career change and went back to school, and was fortunate to join UNC Charlotte's cybersecurity program in 2018. He currently works at JELD-WEN in a 2-year IT rotational program, and his first assignment revolves around SAP GRC controls and JET 2.0 enterprise transformation. That means something to a lot of you. I have no idea what that is. I had to Google it, but it's very cool. So without further ado, please welcome Jennifer Hull, Holly Milanese, and John Frye to Accelerate to Industry. The floor is yours.
Thanks, Jay. Thank you so much, Jay. We appreciate it. Thank you all for taking the time to join us today. I'm going to go ahead here and share my screen in just a moment. All right. Well, hopefully everyone can see that the screen shared there. If not, definitely put a note in the chat box so that we can make sure we make some adjustments. Today, we are so excited to take this opportunity to talk to you about translating your academic career to the workplace. So a few things here that we wanted just to mention. So you may notice on the slide, you see a briefcase or a suitcase, and you may be wondering, that's great, right? But what does that have to do with my academic career? And so one thing we just wanted to let you all know is that we really see this translation of your academic career to the workplace as a journey. with many steps along the way. So we're going to have an amazing opportunity today to join together on this journey as we actually walk through your unique situation and your unique interests. So before we get started, some brief introductions, although Jay did such a phenomenal job with the introduction, so I won't cover too much here. But again, as Jay mentioned, my name is Holly. I do work at a company called JELD-WEN, and I'm a proud alum of UNC Charlotte, as he mentioned, in 2008. So very excited for this opportunity to join my alma mater and my fellow Niners today. And also he mentioned I do have a graduate degree in organization development, so definitely have gone through that experience of translating my academic career into the workplace personally as well. So happy to share some personal insight along the way. And as Jay mentioned, I currently work at JELD-WEN. We're overseeing our corporate onboarding programs and university relations, so essentially our early career programs. And in that, I actually sit in human resources, very specifically in talent development. So before turning it over to my colleagues here, I also want to mention that prior to JELD-WEN, I worked at a local university and was in higher education for almost 7 years and still serve as an adjunct instructor. And most recently in career development, where I actually had the pleasure to work with my fellow presenter here, Jennifer Hull. So Jennifer, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Holly. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for having us today. As Jay and Holly mentioned, I currently work at Ally Financial, so I've only been in this role for about 13 weeks. Worked 2 years at Electrolux overseeing their internship and co-op program. And then, as Holly said, we worked together in the Vandiver Center for Career Development at Queens. I was at Queens for 8 years and love and found my passion with helping college students. So Holly and I definitely have just stayed in touch as we went back into the corporate world. And I like to rope her into other things that I'm doing. And so when Jay asked if we would be interested in doing this, I wanted to do it with Holly just because in the recruiting world, we were talking beforehand that it's just a small world and you kind of also need to be able to bounce ideas off of each other. So as we were preparing for this presentation, we just hope that our unique experience of corporate and academics can hopefully help you. And that's really what we are hoping that you get out of this presentation today. It's just an opportunity to really walk away with some tangible things that will help you take your academic career into this corporate world. So thank you for having us.
Thank you, Jennifer and Holly. I'm John, as they introduced you to. I work at JELD-WEN, and I'm a UNC Charlotte graduate. I was just in y'all's position 6 months ago. I can give you the tips and trades and things I learned and picked up along the way to help y'all out. I'll be more than happy to talk about what I do and my experience. I'm in the IT rotational program, and I'm from Charlotte, North Carolina. Keep it simple right now. If you have further questions, get it later.
Awesome. Thank you all. So now we talked about how we're going to be discussing translating your academic career to the workplace. And we mentioned that this is a journey. So let me walk you through a little bit about what that journey is going to look like in our session today. The first one here is academic workplace translation. So in this section, we're going to be learning about translation and how this translation happens at actually various stages of your journey going from academics to the workplace. So we're going to talk about what those different stages look like. Then we're going to have an opportunity to dive into this concept of working backwards reflection. You may be wondering, what in the world is that? So what we're going to do actually before we really get into the meat of our presentation, we're going to have you all spend some time reflecting on your own experiences. We're going to start all the way back from your interests, and we're going to work backwards from there. And then next, we're going to spend some time looking at particular tips for each of these translation stages. So as I mentioned a minute ago, we're going to talk about this translation in these three main stages. And so Jennifer is actually going to give you tips and tricks for each of these stages along the process. Then we'll have an opportunity to do some practice time. So we really think that it's important that from our session today, we want you to have something that's tangible, something that's unique, and rings true for you. So we really feel that by giving you an opportunity to reflect personally and then actually have a conversation with some other folks in the breakout room and talk about these particular things that you've learned and how they're relevant to you, we feel that will really help you walk away with something tangible from our conversation today. And then John's already alluded to this a minute ago, but we will actually then have an opportunity, some questions and answers. So we really want you to take this opportunity to maybe ask some of those tough questions that you've always wanted to know, but maybe we're a little bit nervous to ask. So the great thing about this, these questions today is that you can either send them over to Jennifer and myself, either as current employers, as former individuals who worked in career development, as former graduate students who've gone through this transition. But then you also have John, who's been in your shoes, as he just mentioned 6 months ago. So he'll be able to provide some really great insight about that experience. All right, so now that we know where our journey is leading us, let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing we have here is a poll question. All right. And then Jay is a way to pop up our question here. So the question is, when you heard about the title, right? You heard about translating your academic career to the workplace. What did you first think about when you heard about this translation? What came to mind first? Were you thinking about this as an applicant? So gosh, okay, I've got to translate my experience as an applicant. I'm applying for a position for the first time. Or maybe you're thinking about it as a candidate. So you've already applied, and now you are taken as a candidate. Or C, did you think about this as a new hire? Did you already assume that you had the job, and now you're in this new role and you're figuring out how to translate your academic experience to the workplace? So give you all just a minute to answer. All right, very good. Okay, so it looks like 82% of you assume that you are an applicant. So you are just in the process of applying for the job. Okay, but we still had 1% vote as a candidate and 1% as a new hire. So great, thank you. That helps us really tailor our conversation with you today. So thank you so much for answering that. Okay, so I already alluded to this a little bit with this poll question here, but when we're thinking about this as a journey, right, and this translation happening at various stages, Jennifer and I really sat down to think about, okay, when do you really need to translate this experience? And as I mentioned, it happens at a couple places. So the first stage here is as an applicant, which is, basically from our poll results, most of you had assumed that you were really having to first focus on your translations as an applicant. So we're going to spend some time talking about this today. Also, there's a translation as a candidate. So I already mentioned, so at this point, you can assume you've already applied and now maybe you're interviewing, right, as a candidate. And then the final translation stage here is as a new hire. So you've landed that job and now you're new in this position and you're having to translate what you've learned from the classroom into the workplace. So today we're going to spend some time actually going through each one of these stages and helping you build your own reflections and your own answers and responses. And again, as I mentioned, then Jennifer will take you through each one and give you some tips and tricks for each stage. So Jennifer, I'm going to kick it over to you to have us walk through this working backwards exercise.
Perfect. Thank you, Holly. All right. So when you're thinking about, okay, I'm about to graduate, or I need maybe an internship or co-op, depending on what area of grad school you're in and what opportunities are there, you might think of it in that candidate experience or resume writing of saying, okay, this is what I can bring to the table, or this is what I can bring to the company. But what you really have to do is really start backwards and think about the job and kind of what job do you want and what is that job looking for? So that's what we'll really kind of dive in today, of thinking through and reflecting on, okay, what are my experiences in this academic world that I've gained and what can I bring to a company? But how do I tailor those experiences to the job? So for the next slide, I guess, or animation. Perfect. So yeah, you'll just kind of think about that job description first. So here on that right-hand side of kind of the suitcase or briefcase, I guess not suitcase, briefcase, for the briefcase, what is that job? And then you'll kind of just start thinking backwards. What have I learned in the classroom? What types of experiences have I gained in my time at UNCC? And those will start adding up to what we need to get ready and preparing for our resume, preparing for our interview, and then actually being that candidate on site. So as Holly mentioned, we'll kind of dive in a little deeper each stage of the process.
All right. So let's go ahead and start working through this working backwards. So this is where we really want this to be highly reflective and very personalized. So I know that we don't have the opportunity to see you right now and to be able to walk around and have a conversation. So I'm gonna ask you a series of questions. At this point, it's a little bit rhetorical, hoping that you can take some notes. And then of course, when we get into our breakout sessions, we can have a lot more dialogue and conversations to be able to help guide you along the way. So as Jennifer mentioned, when we think about this translating your experience into the workplace, many people often go straight to duties. They think about, they build their resume or they start rehearsing for their interviews, and it's all these things that they've done, all these things that they've accomplished, maybe a running list, right? Especially if you see a resume and you see, when you see a running list, it's really difficult for employers to be able to digest that sometimes. So the purpose of this exercise today is to really get you to think about this differently. So instead of you jumping in and preparing for an interview or jumping in and writing that resume, we want you to work backwards, as Jennifer mentioned. So right now, I would like for you to start thinking about the job. What is the job that you want to be doing when you complete your graduate studies? And if you don't know a particular job title or a particular job, then start thinking about what is it that you actually want to be doing? What excites you? What makes you happy? And jot some of those things down. And one thing to know about job titles is, in every company, sometimes those job titles do change from company to company. So if you get stuck on this, don't worry. You can definitely lean into your career office and other resources to be able to help you navigate those intricacies or differences between those companies. So again, write down what is that ideal job, and then start thinking about what are the responsibilities of that role. So what is it that you're going to be doing day to day? And you're not thinking about your skill sets yet. We are just thinking about your ideal role. All right. And also start thinking about what is if maybe you have a very specific company in mind that you're interested in. It's okay if you don't. If you do have a specific company in mind that you really had your eyes set on, write down, what does that company do? What is their added value, right? So what do they bring to the workplace? So go ahead and jot that down as well. And the biggest thing to note here, and these particular responsibilities and why it's so important to write these things down is, and I know that it's okay to speak for myself and Jennifer and probably others, but oftentimes when we're reading over cover letters or we go through the interview process, I have a lot of candidates that will talk about what they're going to gain from the experience. So I'm really excited about this because I'm going to learn so much more about IT applications, or I'm excited to have this job because I'm going to really get an opportunity to explore, 4 different rotations within a rotational program. And that is wonderful, right? An employer definitely wants to hear your excitement and your personal connection to the role, except that when you are trying to translate that for them at this stage, what they really want to hear is what value are you going to bring them, right? So what are those key, really defining what are those key responsibilities at this stage is going to help you with that translation when we get there here in a couple of slides. All right, so hopefully you have a couple of things written down. So let's continue to work backwards. And now let's talk about you. So we've gotten to already talk about that ideal job, but now it's all about you. So I want you to use that particular role and those responsibilities that you've written down. And I want you to start thinking about what you've done, what you've accomplished. It's a huge thing to be able to go through this particular graduate program. You've worked really hard to get to where you are. So I know you've accomplished something. So write down some of those things about what you've learned. So some questions to maybe help you through that is, what have you learned that it can align itself to these particular responsibilities? What experiences do you have that maybe relate to the job? So to give you some examples, if you might be stuck, it's, thinking about class projects, right? So you can almost look at that as project management. So there are cases, I'm sure, where you've had to maybe serve as a leader on a particular class project, or maybe it's something that you're working on as a capstone project, or maybe it's research experience. You could be serving as a TA, right? And you've learned, I'm sure, many lessons through those experiences, or could even be leadership roles or committees that you've served in. So those are the types of experiences that I want you to go ahead and jot down now. So just write down, what experiences have you learned? Have you gone through? What have you learned during your time while in school? So I'll give you just a minute to jot down a few other things. All right. Well, hopefully by now you've written down some incredible experiences during your time in school. So let's go backwards one more time. So now if you notice, we've kind of started big, right? And now we're getting very specific. So now this is the last step in working backwards, and this is your skills. So again, if you think about this key experience, if you're thinking about the job and what they're really looking for at the company, you're thinking about what experiences you may have had that connect to those particular responsibilities. But now you're also thinking about what are those skills or competencies that you've learned through those incredible experiences. So I'm going to throw up a couple notes here, and then I'm going to walk you through them. So the first one here is technical skills. So I start there because sometimes these are overlooked. So technical skills, these can be computer software, data analytics, Excel. So whatever technical skills that you have had to utilize during your time in school, these are the things that you want to take note of, okay? And now I want you to write down soft skills, which I prefer to call professional competencies. So soft skills are professional competencies. So what are some of those professional competencies that you've demonstrated in your academic career? And I often find that many people don't really see the incredible value that these professional competencies have. Oftentimes, employers, and I know that even a National Association of Colleges Employers, NACE, even supports this through the employer survey to say that technical skills definitely are important, right? They're very relevant. At the same time, many employers value those professional competencies because the technical skills they can work with you on. So John's moving into this rotational program. He may have never touched whatever this particular assignment is. That's okay. His manager can go in there and help him learn those skills needed. But really, it's the professional competencies that he can come in with that make him successful in his rotation. So some of these professional competencies are things such as leadership, communication, teamwork, critical thinking. So right now, I want you to be very specific. I want you to write down 1 or 2 examples of when you have demonstrated these competencies. And again, just to give you an example, maybe you served as a project leader on a particular project that you were working on. So you can ask yourself, gosh, what professional competencies did I demonstrate? Well, leadership for one, right? Because I had to kind of own and help support our group through this particular project. It might have been critical thinking. It might have been adaptability. That's I feel like the word for 2020 right now. Everything having gone on with COVID, we've all had to learn to be very adaptable. And that may have even changed the way that you had to work through your project. And that's huge. That's a very valuable skill. So write down 1 or 2 examples for me. All right. Hopefully that gave you enough time, but if not, at least a couple notes that can help trigger your memory for later. So now on your piece of paper or on the computer, here are the things that you should have in front of you. You should have your ideal role. And if it's specific and you want to include a company job, that's fantastic. If not, it's really more of key responsibilities, what you want to be doing when you graduate. Then you've backed it up and you wrote down some of your personal experiences, things that you were able to accomplish and learn while you were in school. And you also then have very specific skills that you've written down that are your skills, things that you know that you can add value and you can bring to the table. So some of those technical skills as well as professional competencies. And then you've also jotted down just one or two very quick examples of when you've demonstrated these. So hold on to these, because we're actually going to have an opportunity to talk through these during the practice time. And that's where we can make this very applicable and very personalized to your own experiences and having to translate that. So we're going to go ahead and move on here just for a moment. And I know I've covered these already, but I just kind of want to walk you through these steps once more and explain the tangibles. So, the most important thing, first I'll just say, the most important thing is that when we're talking about translation, what we mean by that is helping the employer understand you, your role, your value, and what your contributions can be, right? And so what's interesting about this translation is that the most important thing is that your job is to make this as easy as possible for the employer. We know that you can do the work. We know you have these competencies, but you don't want the employer guessing how certain things are maybe related or maybe relevant, right? So you don't want a big maybe or a big question mark. If an employer has to look through a resume or kind of work through some examples in an interview and you really can't put their finger on how that directly relates to what you'll be doing, that means that you need to work a little bit harder working through some of those translations, which is why we hope that we can have sort of that hands-on experience with you all today. So as I mentioned, as these go through various steps and journeys, let me talk to you a little bit about the output. So as an applicant, your role in helping the translation is most likely, I would say, most likely as an applicant through a resume, or in some cases, even LinkedIn, right? So you need to work really hard to translate your experience to that particular role on that piece of paper, on that resume. So many times people kind of give that one resume they send out to everyone, but our recommendations here, that's not going to be the case. We want it to be very highly personalized and specific for the role. So Jennifer's going to walk you through some tips and tricks for that. The next stage here in the journey is a candidate. So you do this most likely as a candidate, you're doing this through an interview. So you need to work through those translations as you're practicing and preparing for that particular interview. And then finally, that day-to-day work. So you've landed the job, and that translation needs to now be in the way that you show up and the way you demonstrate and the way that you conduct your work. So I think I'm actually going to kick it over to Jennifer now, who's going to walk you through some tips and tricks for very specifically for each of these stages. But before we do, I think we have one more poll for you.
Thanks, Holly. All right. And Holly, you might have to mute yourself because I was hearing some feedback, but. So I believe we have another poll in our poll section of Hopin, and just really, again, wanting to understand where you guys all feel on what is the most challenging part of this job search. Holly and I might be more eager to work on our resume and practice interviewing than others, just because this is our space, this is what we love to do. But others are like, begrudgingly have to do it, might feel like homework, but it's very, very important. As Holly said, this is like your first stage. So we just really wanted to kind of assess where you were, of kind of what's the most challenging part. Was it resume, interviewing, or to be honest, if it's both? And I don't know how I can see the responses. Is that you, Holly? Or Jane?
Yeah, I can see the responses. Okay. So Jennifer, we have 33% of the participants today said the most challenging is resume writing. We had 44% that interviewing is the most challenging. And then we have about 25% say that both are challenging, equally challenging.
Perfect. All right, good mix. All right, then we can just jump right in. So as Holly mentioned, it's the resume is that first part of how you're translating your academic career into the workplace. And I really can't stress this enough that it really is your job to make it the easiest for that recruiter. So the recruiter, if you put yourself in their shoes, are looking through hundreds, maybe thousands of resumes, and you're just as I know a lot of students have mentioned, I'm just another resume, I'm just another number. How do I stand out? Well, you really can stand out. You'd be surprised about the variety of looks and feels to resumes, and you can definitely find that strong one and pull it out from a crowd. And so just from a big picture of resume writing, because we learned that there might have been already a resume topic during the semester, so we didn't want to dive in too deep. But from a academic standpoint, you don't really need your CV to move into the corporate world. Most recruiters are only spending about maybe 5 seconds looking at your resume, and then if you can kind of catch their eye based on that format, that layout, then they're going to dive in deeper to the content and really focus on what you said in your bullet points. So we would really encourage you to edit your CV and get it down to that 1 page. I think 2 pages is fine, mostly if it's relevant content and it relates to that job. But if you really can edit and say, okay, what we kind of practiced at the beginning of this presentation, what is the job? What are my experiences and how do they align to this role? And those become your key bullet points on your resume. And so again, making sure you're using those action verbs to really tailor that content. So I remember Holly and I might have heard some students that were in graduate programs at Queens and saying, I don't have any experience yet. I haven't worked really in a corporate world, or I don't have that internship yet. And what we really started talking them through with was that you might have been a TA. As Holly mentioned, some of those class projects are really project management, or you're a research assistant. So you might have to just think about it in a different lens of how your academic experience really does translate into the corporate setting, because everybody needs a project manager. We all need to be collaborative and communicate. We all need somebody that can really analyze and synthesize data. So how can those skill sets be on your resume and really stand out? And really that third bullet point is just making it super easy for the recruiter. So just making sure it's organized, it's easy to read, it doesn't look sloppy, and really having that second set of eyes on a resume. So Holly and I, we moved out of Queens and into different roles, and we still helped each other look over our resumes, and sometimes you just forget what you've done. So having another classmate or somebody, a faculty member, and say, tell me what I was good at. Tell me what did we do? Because sometimes you just get kind of stuck in your own head of, oh, I'm not that great, or I don't remember everything. But really having that friend that becomes that career coach for you to start just processing and reminding you of all the amazing things you've done. So that's kind of what our practice session will be, of just kind of answering those questions, but also just talking through things, just because that definitely helps you figure out what should go on your resume, and then how do you edit your resume to really stand out. Oh, I lost the slide, Holly. The next page for interviewing. All right, thank you. So for the next stage, once you get to your resume and you get through the door, the recruiter's gonna call you and ask to do either an on-demand video interview or an in-person interview. And I think by now we're all pretty comfortable with a Zoom meeting, WebEx. What else is out there? We have Modern Hire here at Ally. So instead of your traditional phone screen, a lot of companies had moved to on-demand videos, and definitely did it during COVID, since they couldn't bring anybody on site. So for your on-demand video interview, typically you'll get a list of questions up front from the company asking you about your interest in the role, maybe some behavior-based questions about problem solving, risks that you've taken, teamwork. And so it is your opportunity to be able to prepare a little bit in advance. And so some tips and tricks on that are to look at the camera, even though you won't be able to watch yourself, but to look directly into the camera and talk to the camera for your interview. Make sure the lighting is really good. Not play with your hair or play with something on your desk. Definitely don't read your answers, because we can tell that if you're reading your answers or not. So just kind of basic interviewing tips. But to really answer and to really stand out in an on-demand video as well is to really showcase why you're interested in this job, and then what do you want from the job, but really more importantly, what can you bring to the job, as Holly said. So from your resume and kind of thinking through what opportunities do I have that I can share and that I can help the company grow in whatever department I go into. So when you're thinking about that on-demand video, definitely showcase your enthusiasm and your passion for the job, but also being able to explain what you'll bring to the job is really key too. I'd also encourage students not to spend too much time answering just because you might have a lot of questions. So not to rush through it, but to also get straight to the point, because again, the recruiter is listening to a lot of these videos and they want you to get straight to the point as fast as you can. And then the second part, once you kind of get past that on-demand video interview, is then to move to that in-person interview. And again, a lot of companies still aren't doing in person, but they're doing a live video interview through their technology platforms. And this is your opportunity to have the time to, again, share more about what you're interested in, why you're passionate about this position, but also, again, explaining what you can bring to the table. So a lot of the companies are setting up their formats with behavior-based questions, and they're aligning it to their mission, to their values. So again, understanding why you want a particular job and also why you want that particular company, that will come into play in your interview. So we really want to make sure you're aligning your answers to what have you done that aligns to those values, but also why, from just a personal aspect, how do your values align with their values? Because every company has their own culture, their own set of values. And what we have found as employers and even in academics, most students want to make sure their values are aligning with the company's and being able to believe in the work that that company is doing every day. And so when they're interviewing you, they want to make sure that you would fit into that culture based on your unique experiences, your unique background, and make sure you're passionate to show up to work every day. Kind of a side example of a story from a student that I was working with. He was getting the in-person interviews. He's like, I feel like I have a strong resume. I'm getting my interviews, but I'm not getting the job. And so we were kind of just talking it through and asking questions of like, okay, how are you answering your questions? Are you using maybe a STAR technique? And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, are you actually telling the company you want to work for them? And he's like, no. And I'm like, all right, you need to. Like if I'm hiring somebody, and I've worked with a lot of different hiring managers, they want somebody that is passionate and who wants to be there and care. And that's like sometimes half the battle that a hiring manager has is just the attendance, making sure people do their job. So if they already know that you are passionate about the work and want to be there, you'll nail the interview. So just a little tips and tricks from behind the scenes. All right, next slide, I think. All right. So you've done your resume, you've nailed the interview, and now you actually have to translate and be a professional in the corporate setting. So what does it feel like to be that new hire, and how can you succeed? And as we were talking about the interview of showing your enthusiasm and passion for the job, a lot of what you're doing in classes and in school really do translate really well into the office. So asking questions. You are new and they know you're new, but they sometimes forget that you are new, which is kind of ironic in the whole thing. But they just might they're just busy with their own, your manager might be busy with their own workload, your teammates might be busy. And so typically you have to be the one that's asking the questions and just even asking like, where's the restroom? Like, what's the typical protocol for X, Y, and Z process? And so don't be afraid to ask questions. Totally normal. And I know some friends that moved from academics to corporate were, I think, afraid at first just because they felt like everybody else around them already knew everything. And that's not the case. Everybody needs to learn, everybody needs to ask questions, and everybody was in that same boat. So it's almost like starting school all over again and being a first-year student or first year in grad school and not really knowing how everything works just yet. So don't be afraid to ask questions. And to that extent, to be that team player, to really get involved. If a manager says, hey, I need somebody to do X, Y, and Z project, raise your hand for it, help your colleagues out. I find that that's the best way to kind of understand the culture around you, of kind of understanding how people work, the work dynamics, what projects are the most important and vital for a company, and just getting really involved from day one. So similar to what you might have done on campus of different student groups of getting involved, signing up for some research projects, helping another colleague with their research, definitely translates into how to be a really good employee on day one. And then a lot of companies also have employee resource groups. So getting involved in that way with their diversity initiatives. They might have some planning events on campus for their company as well, to kind of have like an ally day, of just kind of just a fun day to say thank you to all the employees. So just ways to volunteer with your company. And then share your experiences. You definitely have a unique set of experiences that a lot of individuals don't have. And so being able to bring your lens of academia into the workforce is definitely unique and needed. A lot of companies are looking for data analytic roles, and just being able to have that background of synthesizing information, collecting data, understanding it, and presenting on it, definitely showcase that skill set into your everyday work. And then also just from a different lens and angle, all those unique perspectives help build a team and help build a company and make it better and help it grow as well. So always be proud of your degree, be proud of what you've accomplished. It might not have been the same road that somebody else on the team has done, and they've worked at that company for 5, 10, 15 years. But every individual's experience is unique and really helps the team just be better. So just wanted to reiterate that don't be intimidated by other like corporate professionals. That's not the case. You don't need to be. All right. I think I'm done. Yeah. All right. So, Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Okay. So since we've given you a lot of information, we did want to just take some time to break out into sessions. So what I think will happen is that you can click on what session you want to join, either me, John, or Holly, and we can just kind of talk through things. I think that would help us get to see you face to face. We all obviously know sometimes in a big or larger kind of Zoom meeting, it's intimidating to ask those specific questions or just get things answered. So we wanted to be able to take some time practice. So you want to just do like 5 minutes, guys, and then we can do the Q&A?
It's perfect.
Okay.
So for everyone now, if you'll click the sessions on the left-hand menu bar, and then you can choose one of the rooms to go into. Last names A through K, choose room 1, L through P, room 2, and Q through Z, room 3. And we'll see you back here shortly.